Happy Juneteenth, everyone. We've got a very special episode for you guys tonight. Tonight, we are paying tribute to our Black American ancestors by honoring Juneteenth on this podcast. We will dive deep into the history of this day and how it came to be celebrated. Join us in this discussion and in uplifting our Black American ancestors who will never be forgotten. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode that we're going to be doing tonight here on CaCo Talks. Tonight, we are celebrating Juneteenth on none other than the holiday itself, June 19th. We really wanted to do this episode not only as a way to commemorate the fact that this holiday has now been made a national holiday, as it should have been much sooner than last year, but we wanted to really do this episode just to celebrate, commemorate our ancestors, those who lived way before us, those who fought way before us, those who endured way before us. And to give our listeners, our community, a little insight into what Juneteenth really means, not only for the past, but what it can mean for us today and in the future. So, yeah. Excited to talk about Juneteenth, Catelyn?
I am excited. I'm actually surprisingly off today on June 19th, so Juneteenth. I work for a university, and so that's a change of pace, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is new, so that's exciting.
Yeah, that's
great things are coming out of this, and it's also recognized as a federal holiday, so
as it should have been.
To that, as it should have been, but you know, I mean, I feel like this is like a little hush moment around America, but we'll take it.
Yeah. It's definitely, I have to say this holiday became much bigger, obviously, after, the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement made such a big splash, in American culture, not only Black people being involved, but white Americans being involved as well. And people really demanding like you don't kill Black people just for being Black, right? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Really protesting the police brutality and poor treatment of Black people in America. So, I mean, this, even though some see this as a symbolic just gesture of the government trying to kind of quell the Black people and try to give them something, I think it's important, regardless of how this, federal holiday came to be. It's important to recognize the people who really endured enslavement in America and people who really genuinely built this country. So I'm happy that we're able to have a serious discussion about it, give some history about it, and hopefully prompt people to do their own research, to start their own celebrations, to really recognize the importance of this holiday. Because to me, the American independence should be Juneteenth, because nobody's free until everybody's free, right?
Yeah, so, exactly.
To me, this holiday is really even more important than 4th of July. This is
especially for African Americans.
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, we're excited to have this discussion, and we're going to kick off this discussion by discussing the history of Juneteenth. Just for those who don't know, most people kind of know this overview of it's when the slaves were free, but that's not exactly really how the day came to be celebrated. So, just so we know, slavery did not officially end on June 19th. And really, slavery didn't even end with the Emancipation Proclamation, which is what most people think too. Slavery continued much longer than that. Why? Because the Union Army wasn't necessarily in a position to go and enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation had been signed 2 years before Juneteenth even came into being. So slaves were free long before a lot of them even knew about it. So this is the direct history of the day, but why the day has its name, Juneteenth, and why it's specifically celebrated on June 19th is because on June 19th, 1865, General Gordon Granger of the Union Army arrived in Galveston, Texas, and there he announced to the slaves that they were free. He read General Order Number 3, which I will read in a second, but He read that to the slaves, announcing that they were free, and the slaves were like obviously overjoyed at learning about their freedom, which they technically had for 2 years at that point. Um, he, uh, being overjoyed, they started calling June 19th. June 19th was obviously a day of freedom, a day of rejoicing, a day of like, almost like rapture, right? Because you're suddenly free. Um, and so they shortened the name and it became, instead of June 19th, Juneteenth, right? And so I guess it's sort of like a slang term, or it's sort of the
Yeah.
combination term, right? Um, so yeah, after, and it's important to note that on June 19th, the war had been over and the Emancipation Proclamation had already been signed. So there was no, at that point, there was really no barrier to going and freeing the slaves for the Union Army, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Union Army had the manpower and they had the ability to enforce the end of unpaid labor. So that was really why June 19th came into being. It wasn't just like I don't know, I think people think it's like an arbitrary day that they just suddenly were like, "Oh, all slaves are free." Like that's not really how it happened. It happened specifically on June 19th um because that's when he reached Texas. So it could have been June 20th, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, and then another thing that I think is important to note is that some slave owners, even despite being, you know, uh, despite this proclamation coming out and knowing about the Emancipation Proclamation, they did not give up their slaves until they were literally absolutely forced to. Like, Union Army soldiers had to come onto their land and be like, "Give up your slaves right now, or unpaid labor right now, like today. You're not going to continue to do this."
Really disgusting.
Yeah,
Despicable.
it is disgusting. And another thing that happened that think people don't account for either is that a lot of slave owners wouldn't even tell their slaves that they were free. They would know about the Emancipation Proclamation and not tell their slaves, so they were still in bondage. It wasn't freeing Black people, and getting civil rights for Black people is never an easy thing, right? They never just hand over
Facts. It's
equality
a fight
or
still.
privilege or rights. It's never an easy process. So that's important to keep in mind too, is that even in receiving federal freedom from the United States where they live, there was a fight in that too. So that's something I think to be recognized as well,
Yeah.
for sure. And not that, and something else we could have a whole other episode on is just being free didn't mean that things were over. That racial tensions or something were like over for Black people in America. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, a lot of things were just starting. The like KKK came about as a reaction to freed slaves and freed, you know what I mean? Like groups of Black people gaining their own economic power, gaining their own, liberties and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so that stuff is important, I think, to know, because I think some people really do think it was like this magic wand, like, "Oh, you're free now," and then you know, then the next thing you hear about is civil rights movement, and like there was a lead up to the civil rights movement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's important
Yeah.
to just continue to note.
I think also too another thing about Juneteenth is that it kind of like died down for a while, then it kind of like picked back up. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of um, I guess like a lack of education surrounding it.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
so make yourself knowledgeable on the holiday, please.
yeah,
Please.
exactly.
Before you just go assuming what it is or what it isn't. So,
Yeah. And another thing, even in the Black community, Juneteenth wasn't even something that was like super widely celebrated. Like we've never,
yeah,
in our own family, we've never had a specific Juneteenth holiday like celebration. A lot of people didn't even
I
know what
know.
it was until they
So it happened.
recognized it federally in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, no, I
So
had never knew about it or heard about it really until last year, maybe the year before that. Um, but I think I really researched it for the first time like last year.
yeah, I had heard about it peripherally, but it wasn't something that people were starting to like recognize,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, and it was certainly not something that was like, there was no real celebration of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so I think that it had been a holiday that if you were in specific groups, maybe you celebrated. I know they still have, like in Galveston, Texas, they still have parades and still have like major celebrations,
Okay.
but that's also where it happened, right? That's where Juneteenth really originated.
Mm-hmm.
So, but other places around the country, it seems to not have that like hold or that like commemorative
Mm-hmm.
spirit to it. And it could be because, to be honest, maybe slaves had already been freed to a certain point before they got to Galveston. You know what I mean? And so maybe it doesn't
Maybe.
have the same, it didn't hold the same like weight. But I do think it's important for just all, ancestors of enslaved peoples to have some day to recognize that. You know what I mean? If we're going to have 8
Mm-hmm.
Memorial Days, which it feels like we do have 8 holidays for veterans, we can have something for the, you know what I mean? Like for enslaved people who built this nation. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And,
I feel
and
that.
certainly built the wealth of this nation. So, and that's not to say the veterans are not important. I'm not saying that because I know somebody gonna say something about that.
Oh
Veterans are
God,
important
please.
and they sacrifice for this country too. I'm not saying they don't, but our nation takes pride in commemorating veterans. There are at least 3
Mm-hmm.
holidays I can think of right now related to veterans. Seriously,
Yeah, for sure.
Memorial Day. What is the other one? There's a Veterans Day, and then a lot of people celebrate vets on when they do September 11th. There's I don't know.
Yeah, there's 9/11 where they do 9/11, which is not
Mhm.
necessarily veterans, but those who sacrificed their lives in like the Twin
From the
Towers because
country,
of
yeah.
whatever. Then you have Veterans Day, you have Memorial Day.
I
Um,
think there's another day.
I think so too.
There's some other day for related to veterans.
Yeah,
Well, a lot of people on July 4th celebrate that as well,
yeah, which is
like
kind of related.
freedom. Yeah. So I think there's a lot celebrating, frankly, the mostly the white, you know, contribution or sacrifice, I guess, for the nation. But I
Mm-hmm.
think you know behind every of those founding fathers were hundreds of slaves too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Black Americans who built their wealth and had value and added value to their estates. So it's way past time, frankly, for this to be a nationally recognized holiday. But now that it is, I think it's actually important, and that's something I want to carry actually into my like personal life. Is just commemorating that day
Yeah.
somehow, some way. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
I went for so long not even considering it a holiday, and it is. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Or not even being aware of it, really, because was not aware of it. So,
Yeah,
unfortunately, as I feel, and I feel like the sad part about that is a part of the Black culture, and I had no idea. So
yeah,
that's
and
slightly
that's
disappointing.
another point too. Is like even as Black Americans, because our education is so uh, white, that
Hmm.
our education, our it's largely left out of those circles, so we don't even consider it as a part of our own history, and it is.
Yeah.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But one thing I did actually want to read is the proclamation, not proclamation, but the General Order number 3 that I was discussing earlier that General Gordon Granger announced to the enslaved peoples in Galveston on June 19th, 1865. Because it's really interesting and it sort of sets up what immediately followed emancipation of the slaves. And so I want to kind of have a discussion about this because it not only is it a piece of history, but it it sets up, like I was saying, what became a problem later. Like in freeing the slaves, they also were enslaving them again. So
Hmm.
we can discuss kind of that confliction in that moment and then the celebration of this event. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So okay, here's General Order number 3. This is what he said verbatim. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, that's the president is the executor of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former slaves and between former masters and slaves. And the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer. Okay, so on surface, I don't know if that might not sound a lot alarming. Like, okay, well, whatever relationship is now, you have to be paid if you're going to labor, right? Doesn't
Mhm.
sound alarming. But then that you think about what follows directly after enslavement. A lot of Black Americans or enslaved peoples had went directly into sharecropping, which was as predatory as
The same
slavery.
thing.
Yeah. And you see how that statement, when you think about sharecropping, how it lends itself to exploitive labor. Like maybe they
Yeah.
were being paid, quote, paid, but if they're working the land, keeping crops for themselves, but then giving majority of their crops to an owner, they were almost enslaved again, right? And this
Exactly,
statement
yeah.
sets that up. Like the
Yeah.
connection now is between an employer and a hired laborer. Okay, so they keep them officially on the books as an employee, right?
Yeah, but then they don't pay them.
But they don't necessarily pay them properly. And I mean, just because slaves were free didn't mean white people or people at the time saw Black people as worthy or equal individuals. They still saw them
Mhm.
as Black people,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
inferior. So they were trying to keep that power structure in place as much as humanly possible, and they did that through sharecropping, which was slavery by another name, right?
Yep.
And his statement, despite being from the Union, and we see them as these white knights riding in and saving things, it sets up for what? Sharecropping, which became another exploitive system. Yep,
I tell you. It's not one thing, it's another.
exactly. And that's always constantly been the fight, is they give something and get something,
Yeah.
right?
It's like it's almost like it's always at a price, right? Yeah, you get your freedom. But are you really free?
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, you can relate that to even making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Did they
Mhm.
do it
Yeah.
because they were just trying to really recognize Black American contribution to this nation? Or were they just trying to shut people up?
I think it was a shut up, but that's me.
Yeah, I mean, it came at a time when they were getting a lot of heat from a
Mhm.
lot of people. So
Exactly.
it felt very much like, "Shut up," you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Just
mean,
give
I
you a
guess
little
we'll take
something to
it.
keep it quiet. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll take it because it should have been recognized before, but yeah.
It doesn't make a shush
Yeah.
about the basic rights that, African Americans should have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mind you, like we built this country, let's be honest.
A lot of the wealth,
Not to
yeah,
sound arrogant, but
and to be honest,
there's really nothing to be arrogant about because it's like we were enslaved, but like, come on.
exactly. Well, the thing also I think people don't realize is, like, more than most of the millionaires who lived during that time were living in the South. Like, the South was
Mhm.
incredibly profitable for the United States, the entire United States. So, and were incredibly wealthy. Why? Because they had a huge source of unpaid labor.
Yeah,
Without
yep.
labor, you really are straight profiting.
Mhm. I was in that TV show that recently came out with about the FLDS. They were saying how what is it, Jeff Warren's, I think is his name, Warren Jeff,
Uh,
something like that.
yeah,
Anyways,
Warren.
but he was able to make so much money because he was profiting off of like the teenagers, that part of his community, being a free source of labor. That's why he was able to profit so much and do whatever he wanted with the money, right? So
Mhm.
same principle here with like black slaves. You're able a huge portion of the money that you're spending when you're producing something or making like a building, for example, is your labor. That's a huge, 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 huge cost, right? If you take that out, that's straight profit.
Mhm.
So, you know, just imagine how wealthy they were.
Mhm. And for the time too. I mean, obviously, like the dollar has like increased and money is worth, quote, worth more now, right? But the largest concentration of millionaires at that time were people like people in the South and people who were mostly connected to the slave trade. If they were people who not only were planters and were making actually planting crops and things that were being sent to, like, to be like refined or raw goods, right? That's what they were producing.
Mm-hmm.
But there were people who were in the business of trafficking slaves. People were actually in the business of selling human bodies
Mm-hmm.
to planters or to people who like were looking for like hired help kind of thing. Like this was a business. And like you
Yeah.
had to have money to purchase a slave in the first place. So imagine the people who were purchasing hundreds of them, like that was something that you had to have wealth to be in, and it generated more wealth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So just
So
for
what do you think
context.
so since we are celebrating Juneteenth at this point, what do
Mhm.
you think how should we celebrate Juneteenth? What are some new traditions, kind of like 4th of July, right? Like what should we be doing on Juneteenth?
I think that's a good question because I do think that the holidays seem so new that it's like, okay, what do we do today? I mean, like we have this holiday, what do we do? I think personally, I think we should have. I think first off, there should be reparations. We're talking about
Honey,
this last
sign me
night.
up.
I
Like
think
that money,
if
shmoney.
if we were gonna have if reparations gets passed somehow, some way, I think Juneteenth needs to be the national day that disperses to
Yes, you need to
and
get your
descendants
check.
of American chattel slavery, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think Juneteenth needs to be the annual day that disperses if reparations
Okay,
comes in.
that's fair.
But I also think just, as far as celebrations go, I think we should have outdoor like barbecues. Like they would do back in the day, like literally like they would dig pits in the ground and have barbecues, right? I think we should do that kind of stuff, bring that stuff
Mm-hmm.
back. I think we should continue to do festivals, do traditional food. I almost think we need to make it kind of like this sort of I almost want to make it ritualistic, but I almost feel like it should be like Passover, like Jewish people have Passover, right? Which is sort of like you have a certain time that you do this, you eat this food, you pray and all that, and it has a religious significance. I'm not saying we got to make it as religious, but I do think if we had kind of this like system to it of like, okay, before 12 o'clock we do XYZ, we do that,
Mm-hmm.
we have this sort of like commemorative day where we somehow pay like tribute or do
Like a
something to
Hanukkah.
recognize. Yeah, almost like that. Like something just a little more structured, not just like, oh, let's get together at Uncle So and so's house and, throw some chicken on the grill. Like, not that. Cause I'm like,
Yeah.
because we can do that any time of the day, any time of the summer or any time of the spring, whatever. I think we should have something to be sort of like grounded in like the historical significance of that day and then like have your party. You know what I mean? So I
Okay.
think.
Yeah.
I do think it needs to be gate kept though, because one thing that American and white Americans are going to do is try to take something that
Sure.
really don't belong to them and
Yep.
make it their own, and then it becomes cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So I do
Yeah.
think we should. I
Yeah.
think we should gatekeep celebrations on Juneteenth as much as possible. Although I
Yeah.
guess
I
some
feel like
people
the
will
holiday
ultimately.
should, as a whole, should be gate kept, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, they made it federal now, so I don't know if we can really
Yeah, well,
fully
yeah, I
keep
was
it
gonna
gate
say
kept.
federally that would not be allowed, but the table should be turned. I told we and Courtney were having like a little chat about this, and I was saying like how for that day we should have a black privilege. And that could be part of our reparations because just for that one day to like I don't think it should be one day, but that one day for the tables to be turned so white privilege black privilege could be understood by those who are receiving white privilege currently, right?
They would
Also
make
in
it
that
up though,
space.
even for 24 hours.
Oh, oh my God, yes. Could honey. We might have slavery for the day. Shoot. Um, but I think that would be a good space for like African Americans to educate and to also get together to hopefully change things for the future, right?
Yeah,
But you got to get the right people in the right spaces. So
to make that stuff
I
happen.
was
Yeah.
telling Courtney too, and I think another tradition should be maybe like some sort of education in the community because I feel like a
Hmm.
lot of African Americans, because of just like generational trauma stemming back to slavery, there's a lot of things that just need to be like healed. So that Juneteenth can almost be a day of like healing as well. Um,
Yeah.
and educating on like the holidays so that we can heal and or educating on how we can move forward in the future, so like maybe investing, real estate, property, um, how to maintain a healthy bank account, like those kind of things, resume building, blah, blah, blah. So that could be cool too for a new tradition for Juneteenth in the community.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I mean, I definitely think that I think I think as a community, we need to like a Black American community, descendants of American chattel slavery. That community, people who are direct descendants of that, I think it would be really good if we had some sort of like, colloquium or something on like how to celebrate Juneteenth. Because I think so much of it has been lost as our community has dispersed to different parts of the country, right? Like
Yeah.
at one point, most Black Americans were what, probably in the South, if
Hmm.
not like the North and, different areas like that. But as obviously our community has like shifted to everywhere in the nation, I think some of that like camaraderie has been lost. Some of it has
Hmm.
been forced to strain relationships and like things like that. So, you know, and it doesn't make it any better that so much of the tension in our community comes from the fact that like we are oppressed by this like major white oppressor, right? So I think that I think that if we have some sort of like consensus on like how to celebrate this holiday, like what our tradition or path should be to celebrate this holiday, it could help bring the community together, you know?
For sure. For sure.
And I'm down for it. I mean,
Let's do
I think something about Black communities I think we do need to keep is like our community is known for a good cookout, right? Like our community is known for
it.
somebody's gonna be line dancing, like doing electric slide at the cookout. We're gonna have
Mhm.
Frankie Beverly and Maze. You know what I mean? Like it sounds stereotypical, but it's a truth. Like that's how our community gathers. That's how our community pulls together, gets through things. That's how we, even I mean, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that's how we meet extended family members. That's how we come together. That's what our community has
Facts.
historically done to bond is to have a cookout at so and so's house. So I think that tradition should stay. I don't think that should go anywhere because I do think that that's what Black Americans do, right? And
Hmm.
that's one
Hmm.
thing that we have even in slavery times have been allowed to even do as a form of cultural expression is to get together, make food, kind of fellowship and bond that way, right? So I
Hmm.
think that should be a part of Juneteenth, absolutely, because that's cultural. I just think that it could be good, like Caitlin was saying, to really ground that day in some sort of education or some sort of commemoration for our ancestors. Because a lot of times we'll just have the cookout and not even know why the day's happening. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm glad that Juneteenth is officially like here and officially on the books as a federal holiday. That's great. That's like step number one. But I think now, it should start to come into our hands to like, what do we do with this day? Like, how do we commemorate it? You know what I mean? And to
Yeah.
really pay respect to those who were lost to a horrific institution. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And who survived it
Hmm.
because there's strength in slavery. I've stopped thinking of slavery as this massive like something to be ashamed of. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Somebody endured that so that I could be here today.
Yeah.
That's like that's more than what even a lot of white Americans can say about their ancestors, right? Our ancestors endured horrific, times, horrific behavior in order for us to survive. That's something to be absolutely proud of, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and just wrapping up this discussion on Juneteenth, we wanted to discuss. We know everybody has seen this Walmart doing the ice cream, Juneteenth ice cream thing. And then like these companies trying
Canceled.
to yeah, like people are trying to use the holiday to capitalize on like the trend of social justice or whatever. The Democrats were in the kente cloths and kneeling after the Black Lives Matter marches in 2022.
Yeah. We just want to say, don't do that. Okay.
No, yeah.
Just don't,
That's not the
please.
way to commemorate anything. Like
It
if it's gonna
isn't.
be these kind of hollow gestures, then just
Don't
don't.
do it. Which, like, the flavors they had in the ice cream, like, problematic as well. Like, they were stereotypical, like, black flavors. Like,
Yeah.
now you're also stereotyping for one. So just don't do it. If it's going to be, like, if you want to celebrate Juneteenth and that's something you're genuinely interested in, by all means, do that. And you can make a product with that. But let it be organic, let it be
Or they
genuine.
could put
Um,
They could have got a black-owned ice cream.
Yeah.
That would have been
Yeah.
much more beneficial to the community.
Exactly. Or like just Walmart sponsor a black-owned company that makes ice cream. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That would be great. But instead, they wanted to capitalize off of
For
it.
themselves.
Which, okay, let's be honest. That's the reason why slavery was in place, to capitalize already. So like
Exactly.
come
It's
on,
just some
Walmart.
very tone deaf things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
and it shows that their total lack of, first off, concern for the gravity of that
Exactly.
day, but
Yeah.
also their lack of knowledge. And it shows their privilege. It just shows their total, like,
Yep.
we're not even thinking about this as a serious
Holiday at all.
holiday.
To me, it also undermines like the
Yeah.
entire holiday. Like, you sure they had capitalized off of other holidays or whatever, but like, come on, that was, to me, that was a bit much.
Yeah, because I
It's a
mean,
new federal holiday for one, and the way they did it was like very stereotypical. Like, y'all aren't doing that with Memorial Day, Veterans Day, or 9/11. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
exactly. And you know what? That would have been the same, and people would have been in a total uproar if they had put in, like, they made a Holocaust ice cream
Exactly.
or like Holocaust. So like you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
if they had put that in the, like, in some sort of party format, like, oh, let's
Yeah.
commemorate, like, you know what I mean? It's just
Mm-hmm.
totally tone deaf, totally not
Really.
appropriate. And I just saw, really, that decision was made by somebody who's not black, but somebody older and
Mhm.
like a boomer, like somebody who's like, oh yeah, they like to party, they like cookouts, let's give
Right.
them some cookout gear. like
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
you're reducing the black experience and a significant holiday to party plates and ice cream,
Yeah.
right?
Just
Like,
don't do it.
make it make sense. And the thing is,
Companies,
people would
please.
never do that to the Holocaust.
Oh no, at all. I don't
Never.
think they would do it to a lot of federal holidays that are currently going on
Exactly.
to begin with.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's just ironic, of all the holidays, that's the holiday y'all choose to do that with. Like, okay.
Exactly.
But
And
they
then
were quickly canceled and shut down. So kudos to the African Americans that were like, that we are not having this. Cancel culture is beyond real, and they canceled that
mhm,
ice cream quickly. I mean, I
very
don't even
quickly.
think like it was,
Whoever came up with that needed some sort of demotion too, because
for one.
or they needed to
Yes.
be ushered out of that position, or just their
Yeah.
voice not counted as much anymore, because you can't
Completely
keep leading
insensitive.
the company like that.
Yeah.
It's not doing it.
I wouldn't let that fly, but it's
I can
Walmart.
just
They'll
tell
let
that
anything fly to make a dollar.
exactly. I can just tell they did not ask one single black person to approve that.
Oh yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah.
not one
Or if they
single
did, it
one.
was like a sellout. Like,
Yeah, because any black person would have been like, "What the heck?"
right? Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. One
Yeah.
last thing
Anyways.
I want to note about the history section that I did earlier in the podcast is slavery was not officially ended until the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865, just so everybody knows, because people like to think it ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. Did not end with that. Ended with the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which says slavery is not allowed, basically, in our nation. Which was also, ratified in 1865. Again, not till 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Okay.
Shaking
And
my head.
I think something else that we should note too is that the big reason why the Emancipation Proclamation was even issued as an executive order by the President Abraham Lincoln is not just because he had this benevolent idea of, like, I need to free the slaves. It was an economic decision. That was one way he was using to hurt the Confederate Army, right? Because at that time he was in war. It was his army, the Union Army, versus the Confederacy. And he felt like one way to stop the Confederacy, one way to essentially weaken them, is to what? Take away their unpaid labor by outlawing it, or saying that your unpaid labor is free now. So when they don't have the money to back their army supplies or back their army, it hurts, right? So I want people to understand that too. I think a lot of people just see it as this, like, benevolent gesture. Not saying that he might have been trying to be benevolent. He might have seen slavery as wrong, but more than anything, that was a direct military tactic, just so you know.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't ratified until 1865 that slavery had actually ended, right? So just so you guys know.
Well, good to know.
Yeah, but that was a great conversation we had on Juneteenth. I'm glad that we were able to have it. And yeah, from this day forward, maybe you'll listen to this again year after year about kind of Juneteenth and help you to think about the day and what the history of the day and how we came to celebrate it. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. We wish many more Juneteenths to come.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, let us know how y'all celebrate
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth or your ideas of how it
Suggestions
should
for
be
some
celebrated. Because, me and Courtney, we love a good cookout. So,
exactly.
so yeah, let us know in the comments. We hope y'all enjoy y'all's holiday. And just let us know what are y'all doing? How y'all celebrate it?
Exactly. Yeah. All right, guys. Happy Juneteenth and have
Bye.
a fabulous holiday.
Oh,
Bye.
yes.